Hey, New Faith Church family. It's so good to see you guys. I hope you are doing well. If you remember back in October, we did our Managing the 90% series. And today we have Shantania Leggins, who is back with us from the Architects. We had a really great 4 weeks worth of time with her, maybe 6 or 8 weeks worth of time on managing the 90%. And she has graciously agreed to just talk with us a little bit more today about how to manage that 90% during a time of crisis. And so we know that we have to take care of ourselves mentally and spiritually, but we also have to do that financially. And so, Shantania, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate you even thinking of us and being willing to kind of spend some time to talk with us.
Absolutely. Thank y'all so much for having me back.
So first, there are a number of people who are either being furloughed, have lost jobs, they're not able to pay rent and mortgage. And so I just wanted to ask this question: how should we be working with our creditors and those who we have loans with that are expecting payments in the next couple of days?
Okay. And that's a good question. That's a question that a lot of people are asking. And I think one of the biggest things I want to impress upon you is to be proactive. You know, I know we hear in the media that a lot of the creditors are allowing you to make arrangements and, you know, defer stuff and get forbearance. They are, but you need to reach out to them. Don't just assume because you heard that a certain creditor is doing it, or you know someone who they were able to get their payments deferred. Don't just assume the creditors are going to do it across the board, because that is not always the case. And so you definitely want to be proactive. Pick up the phone. I know it could feel heavy in seasons like this, but pick up the phone and say, hey, you know, this is my situation. I've been laid off. What are my options? And most creditors, if not all, are willing to work with you because they know what's going on. It's not you that's just impacted, it's everybody. And so make sure you do your part and reach out to them and just see how you can get something deferred or maybe a forbearance. Now, this is what you need to understand. In those situations where they allow the deferment or the forbearance, you know, when this is all over, many of those creditors are going to require you to pay that money sometimes all at once. And so, you know, if you could figure out a way to, you know, continue paying or pay something, I encourage you to do so, because you will be responsible for that money at some point. So those are the biggest things I would highlight.
Sure. So you mentioned the idea of forbearance and working with creditors. We are getting information overload. We're hearing a lot about, you know, check this website and, you know, check this local website for information at the state level. And so what are some of the resources that we should be trusting? Where should we be going to get information on just how to manage our finances during this time?
You know, and that's a good question. And, you know, I think there are a lot of resources out there, and some of the more common channels, of course, is just, you know, the local news. You have resources like the SBA. They're pushing a lot of resources and so forth out there via the news channels, even social media. You know, believe it or not, social media is an outlet for news. Now, this is the deal. I think the better question, or how we should look at this deal, is, you know, what resources really depends on what your situation is and, you know, what you need and so forth. But I think with any resource you listen to or you get, you got to make sure make sure that we stay prayed up. Make sure we stay prayed up, asking God for wisdom so that we can use our own discernment. But then after that, you got to get skilled at being able to, I like to call it, eat the meat and spit out the bones. But because we have a lot of information coming at us, you got to be able to decipher, okay, this applies to me, this is important, let me listen. But a lot of that, you know, extra stuff, you could just kind of let it go, right? And so again, just going in this deal with a spirit of discernment, you know, God would allow you to make the proper choices. And then the third thing I want to lift is, you know, I say eat the meat and spit out the bones, but make your decisions with your head, and not the headlines. Make your decisions with your head and not the headlines. I can't stress that enough, because understand the news, even in this time of crisis, they seek ratings, right? So they over centralize everything, right? But making sure you are using your head, you know the right, you know what's right, you know what works for you, right? And so just making sure we're not getting caught up in all of the rigmarole of the news and even social media, and that we using what we currently have.
Sure, you talk about the rigmarole and not getting caught up. There are some scams out there. And so, what are some of the best ways to identify when we get this scam? We've heard on the news folks getting called and pay this to get the check, or, give us your social security number to get this information. So, how can we kind of just be prepared and on guard for scammers?
Yeah, and even it's disheartening that in times like this, the scammers, they just come out in droves, because they always around, but they prey on the weak, right? And so people are in some tempting situations, and people who are up to no good, they will prey on that. What I would say is, know that government agencies, they're not going to ask you for any of that personal identifying information over the phone, like social security numbers, banking information. The reality is, y'all, if it sounds too good to be true, most of the time it is, right? And so you just want to make sure you are just being smart. When our back is up against the wall, or when we're operating in a state of panic, sometimes we could make the wrong choices. So just make sure you keep at a level of consciousness the things that make sense. Don't give your identifying and your personal information over the phone, over the internet, especially if somebody calls you. That's a big thing. If somebody calls you, you want to be very leery of giving out your information. One of the things we always do when people call us, we'll say, okay, you tell me what it is, and then I'll verify, verify your address. You tell me what my address is and I'll verify it. And oftentimes their response will be, well, we can't give that information. Well, neither can I. If you're somebody who needs to talk to me and you need my information, you should be able to say what it is. So just kind of be conscious, that they're out there. And I promise you, it doesn't matter if you're of age, if you have money, if you don't, they will prey on you. So just make sure you're not, giving that identifying information
That's a great
unnecessary.
tip. That's a great tip to ask them to tell you what it is, and
Exactly.
you verify it. Switching gears a little bit, so we know that there will be some folks who will be losing jobs, that may be furloughed, or the position just actually goes away. And so can you talk a little bit about what you know about applying for unemployment? We do know that the Texas Workforce Commission is managing that for our state. But just kind of give us some tips when it comes to applying for unemployment, and what one should do initially when they find out that they're being furloughed or laid off.
Okay. Definitely. As we hear, week after week, the last, month or so, the unemployment numbers have definitely skyrocketed. Make sure you be patient and diligent, because I know last week, I heard from a lot of people that it was difficult getting in, whether you was trying to do it online, over the phone, but just make sure you just keep at it and you will get in. I think some of the bigger tips is, if you find yourself in a situation where you've lost your job, or you kind of feel like it's coming, make sure you are doing, not necessarily you've done, but as it relates to your finances, some of the fundamental things, you might want to look at, cutting out unnecessary spending, some of the recurring transactions that we tend to, do each month. We're in the beginning of a new month, so I would suggest you check your account, and any automatic payments that tend to come out, see if you can put those, freeze them, put them on hold, stop them, because if you're in a position where you're going to, be unemployed, you don't want any of that necessary spending. You want to make sure the four walls are taken care of. And what I mean by the four walls, your shelter, food, utilities, and transportation. Once you get those are like the four walls. Everything else is kind of extra, right? So again, if you're going to be in a position where you're going to be out of work for a while, you definitely want to make sure you're paying attention to some of those basic things.
And the nice thing that I think we've seen is that we are experiencing unprecedented support for people
Yeah,
who are losing jobs. And so we have this gig economy. And so now if
yeah,
you were, a hairstylist, a barber, someone who kind of worked by project or
yeah.
that kind of thing, that even unemployment is covering those types of employees. And so,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the first. That's the first
yeah,
because
right.
usually it doesn't cover those type of, like you said, that the whole gig economy, it doesn't cover them. And then if I could add this, y'all, listen, don't be afraid to pivot. If you find yourself, you're in a position where your job, you've been laid off, or it's coming. You know, this could be a silver lining for you. Don't be afraid. Maybe there's a skill or something that you can do. You've been thinking about. This might just be your opportunity. Just to be transparent, Kendrick and I transitioned into entrepreneurship after Hurricane Katrina. That was our
Sure.
driving force. It was during that crisis because we didn't like that feeling of not knowing what was next as it relates to our jobs. We didn't know if we were going to be able to go back to the city and have our jobs or not. So it was during that crisis, that season, that we made the decision, it's time for us to pivot, right? So this might be, a answer to a prayer. This definitely might be a
Sure.
blessing in disguise. So it's all in how you look at it. Perspective is
Yeah, yeah.
everything.
I'm glad you said that. I think that just kind of transitioned into my last question. And, with regard to finances, what should be the posture of the believer during this time? I mean, it sounds like being able to be flexible. I heard kind of looking at some Dave Ramsey stuff, and, he mentioned not looking at this as a time of loss, not making, kind of knee jerk reactions, because unless you were going to take something out and use it, you haven't lost anything. It's
That's
there,
it.
leave it alone. But what should the posture of the believer be during this time?
That's a great question. And, as believers, we stand by faith. Man, listen, we know that God only moves by faith. And
Sure.
so this is not a sentence, this is a season. And so, as believers, as Christians, faith has to be our guiding force, not fear. I know every morning when we wake up and we look at the numbers rising and this number of people passed away, and the unemployment rate is this and the market has done that. That's enough information to make you feel despair and make you lose hope. But understand that's what the enemy wants. He wants us to be hopeless, right? But we understand the God that we serve, right? And so we understand that even though, the SBA and the government and your job might be offering you resources, who is the ultimate source? God is the ultimate source. And so we can't ever lose sight of that, even in the midst of this, crisis, this storm. This isn't the first one, right? It won't be the last. And if you think back on the last time there was a crisis in your life, who got you through it? God did. And he's going to get us through this one. So as believers, we got to stand on our faith and not fear.
Well, God bless you. Thank you so much for being with us. Just reminding us of some of the things that we need to do with regard to our creditors and managing our money. And just the fact that we know that God is with us and he's going to carry us through this. So I appreciate you. Just continue blessings and prayers for health and prosperity for you and your family. And we'll be back in touch soon. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you
Thanks so
so
much.
much.